This amounts to a complete rejection of spiritual idealism which advocates the metaphysical version of the self. Again, the fact that materiality cannot be separated from mentality and that both materiality and materiality are necessarily dependent on consciousness shows that individual existence cannot be finally reduced the matter materialism either. This amounts to a clear rejection of annihilist materialism which advocates the physical version of the self. Here again, what comes into focus is how Buddhism remains as a middle position in relation to the two predicate ideologies that paralyze our thinking on the nature of individual existence. If the original physical body and the mental factor necessarily depend on consciousness, this means that it's only when consciousness is present that is conformed to mental phenomena function as a sensitive body, and only when consciousness is present to the mental factor participates in cognition. That reciprocal depending on consciousness and materiality show how Buddhism understands the nature of the mind body relationship. Buddhism applies that thread theory, which says that mind and matter are strictly separate. Buddhism also applies the monastic theory, which says the mind and matter are finally reduced to one, either to mind and listen to materialism, keeping it equally aligned from both theoretical Buddhists explain the mind-body relationship as one of reciprocal dependency. The mind-body relationship is explicit that does not mean that consciousness is located in the physical body as assumed by some. Consciousness is not a distant entity to be located in one particular place to the body or in the whole body. The correct position is that consciousness is dependent on the physical body. This situation becomes all the more clear from the Patana or the Vidama Pidaka, where we find the specific reference to the physical, psychological phase or the six kinds of consciousness. The prana being by saying that the eye, ear, nose, hands, and body are conditioned by way of sports, nature, desire. To the five kinds of consciousness named after them, that is said that whether materiality on which mind and mind consciousness occur, thus materiality is a condition by way or based to mind and mind consciousness and what is associated therewith. What we find here is the language on conditionality that depends on the six kinds of consciousness on their respective psychological phase. One question that now arises is that if the mind depends on a physical phase, is not the mind completely determined by matter? And answering this question, we need to take the following data into consideration. There exists in origin the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. They are also called God rather because it's through them that consciousness and its committed mental factor gain access to the object. The sensing organs are also called faculty. Indian. A faculty is so called because it exercises lordship or control over its associate phenomena, since they exercise or controlling power over the five kinds of consciousness, namely after them as eye consciousness and so on. The five physical sense organs are recognized as faculty. For example, one called eye produces compassion, with eye produces poor vision. For our present purpose, what is more important to remember here is that mind is also recognized as a faculty. It is called the mind faculty, Manay Diya. Therefore, although the mind is dependent on the physical body, it is the mind is its capacity as a faculty that exercise lordship and controls over the physical body. With the recognition of mind as a faculty, the preeminence of mind is material, although it is said to depend on the original physical body. Yet, the question of mind being completely determined by matter does not arise. In a comrade exegesis, we find a classic example of illustrate this situation. In the case of both and pose and involvement, it is the pose that the bowman has his physical pose. However, it is the bowman that controls the pose. It is he who decides where to go. The mind is like the bowman and the physical base on which the mind depends is like the bow. Other example is he takes out a man born blind and a store-crowing crippled who went to go on a journey. The blind man had the cripple climb up on his shoulder and made the journey following the instruction given by the cripple. The cripple who can see is like the mind, and the man who can walk is like the physical base of the mind. Yet that the spiritual dependent on consciousness and mentality should be understood as the reciprocal interaction between mind and body. One good example of how the mind influences the physical body is shown in the higher level of the mind, concentration, unification, called jhana. When a person is, for instance, in the first jhana, he resuscitates happiness, the very, the very body, the very body which joins and happiness. Similarly, does physical health ensure mental health? Physical well-being and a good discretion are among the many factors that enable a person to make speech progress toward final emancipation. We can also argue that if Buddhism keeps equally alive from the two perspectives of self-modification and sensual indulgence. It's in order to maintain a healthy mind in a healthy body. For both the impressive ostent and indulgent sensual indulgence are equally injurious to both mental and physical health. For Buddhism, the physical body is not a source or bondage to the mind freedom but a necessary instrument for the mind development. Or change as the Dhammapada says, cut head at the higher. Buddhist discourse often describes physical health in terms of flexibility, lahu, and richness, kaduna, of the physical body. Overeating renders the body heavy and fabrical. It is like a locket or so speed. The chest a state or body is not connected to putting forth energy in the right position in the Thera Katha. We did the Adi Kataka exclusion in the thought that its physical body is light and widely that it flows like a piece of cotton in the air. Cotton in the air. The importance to physical health is expressly recognized in the Theravada Abhidhamma as well. Among the many basic sattva or mentality recognized by the Abhidhamma, there are corporate lighting, rupa, lahuta. Corporeal mentality, rupa, mudita, and corporeal white hair, rupa, samanyata. These three represent the physical body, which is healthy and a metaphor to one. Agreed soul food, sustainable weather, and a wholesome mind are the responsibilities for physical health. These three corporate both fertile heart and matter counterpart counterpart as well. This what is emphasized in Buddhism is not only the necessity that is critical to mental health, but also physical health as well. Chapter 6. The description of the human condition. It is on the promoted notion of dukkha, a theme often written into English as suffering, that the Buddha diagnosis of the human condition is based. This eternally on the theme it might be noted does not broaden out its full implication. Dukkha has a far wider significance that reflects a comprehensive psychological portion. Accordingly, what Buddhism may find dukkha is any kind of condition, experience, and experience depending on employment condition. Condition experience could be extremely pleasant or eternally, extremely unpleasant. Nevertheless, it is substance and dukkha. Even the sensuous jhanis experience that represent higher level on mind gratification and therefore higher level on happiness is also brought under dukkha. For in the final analysis, even jhana experience is impermanent and therefore condition. What is all amount to is that any experience other than the unconditional experience which is nirvana is renowned as dukkha. Addressing Anuruddha, the Buddha said, both formally and now also, Anuruddha, it is yes suffering and the cessation of suffering that I proclaim. This should show what the teaching of the Buddha are and what they are not. The teaching are concerned not mainly but totally which our is a standard principle which according to the Buddha is the problem of suffering and with how suffering can be brought to a complete end. If Buddhism is to be understood in this context, it follows that all Buddhist teachings are ultimately related to the problem of suffering and its final solution. It is on this term that all anti-Buddhist teachings converge, and it is in relation to this that they assume that significant depending arising with the Buddha himself we are to consider at the heart of the Dhamma that implies among the to a statement of the origin of suffering when the constraint formula is understood in its progressive order and to a statement of the cessation of suffering when it is understood in its regressive order. Thus, the teaching of the Buddha converge on the problem of suffering and its solution is also shown by the reference in the Pali discourse to two kinds of teaching. The first is called the graduate thought, Anupapa Katha, thought on charity, thought on morality, thought on heaven as a reward for various living, thought on the dispensation, the folly and the divine nature of sun pressure, and the advantage of renunciation. This was consideration the gratuitous. It is the emphasis on these subjects that Buddhists seem to have shared with many other literature of the day as different kinds of moral teaching. Karma. The second kind of teaching is called the all-extracting discourse, Samukkhadasana. It consists of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddhist diagnosis of the human cognition and its solution. The first is called gratuitous. The kinds of teaching could be understood in two ways. One is that it gradually prepares the background necessary for the deliverance of the all-excluding discourse. The other is that it also gradually prepares the minds of the listener as a proper recipient. Karasatan for a correct understanding of the second kind of teaching, the Buddha begins with the graduate thought. It is not for its own sake, but for the sole purpose to preparing the ground for the deliverance of the correct Buddhist doctrine of the Four Noble Truths. It is throughout four propositions that the Buddha presents this teaching on suffering and deliverance from suffering. There is suffering, there is a cause for this suffering. There is cessation of suffering throughout the removal of the cause of suffering. There's a way which leads to the removal of the cause of suffering that results in the cessation of suffering. When the Buddha proclaimed the presence of suffering, proclaims something sacred. He does not express his personal feeling or emotion. Suffering is not due to our being ignorant or some kinds of metaphysical reality, and or our relation to it, nor it is due to our being ignorant from our true self, or due to our identifying our true self, which was it not the true self. Since for Buddhism there is neither a true self nor a false self. There is only the false notion of the self. The cause of suffering, according to the Buddha, is the central craving. Obviously, it is a cause that is within us and now, or there is external world. Therefore, we also can liberate ourselves from all suffering. When suffering arises within us, when it ceases, it also ceases within us. The both samsara and nirvana are within us. With this very body, declare the Buddha, mortal as it is and only as photo height, but consciousness and words with mind is the one and the waving triple and the advance with mind is the one and the waving devil and the winning devil and the way that lead to death, passing with devil. The Four Two do not interface a hurricane or what the brings into focus in the progressive sequence between four facts. It was caused to death. Cessation of suffering is higher, better than suffering. Yet, the truth of the cessation of suffering is certainly not higher than the truth of suffering. As for proposition, the four truths are all coherent. Yes, they are all introduced as nirvana truth, noble truth. They are equally truths and therefore equally known. Because of the progressive sequence between the Four Noble Truths, the significant or one cannot be understood in a context from where the other three are excluded. Each assumes its significance is relation to the other three. If the truth of suffering is should to be understood, its isolation from the other three truths, such as understanding will necessarily lead to the conclusion that Buddhism advocates a pessimistic view or life, and instead misconception could be easily removed. It is understood in its proper context. In relation to the other three truths, even nirvana, which is the final goal of Buddhism and which is proportionate to the third noble truth, assumes its significance in the context of the other three noble truths. Then mutual relation and other interconnection are such that it will not be incorrect to say that they are not for different propositions, but for assets of one and the same proposition. In point of fact, it is maintained in the Pali discourse, therefore, that when the first noble truth is comprehended, the second suggests is that when the second is comprehended, the third suggests is that when the third is complete, fourth suggests is that the progressive sequence, the Four Noble Truths, its habit is also taken into consideration when they become the visit or visit for activity practice of their reaches life. And it is said that the first or suffering is to be understood in the cause of suffering is to be removed pahadapa. The cessation of suffering is to be realized Sasikatapa. And the path that leads to the cessation of suffering is to be realized Pahwitapa is the second to the move, and the four that need to develop are taken as to assess relation to practice. Then here we had three main dimensions of Buddhism as a relation, namely understanding, practice, and realization. It's under these three aspects that all Buddhist teaching are present. Like many other Buddhist teachings, the Buddhist teaching on suffering is present against the background of simpler theory. Current at the theme machine is made in the Pali discourse on four theory as to why human beings suffer. According to the first, suffering is self-state. This theory is based on the view that there is an identically preceding self-entity that acts and suffers is consequence according to the second suffering. Second suffering is other cause. Someone acts and someone else suffers. The second theory is based on the view that there is completely otherness between the one who acts and the one who suffers. The first, as the Buddha says, lead to eternalism, the second or to annihilism. According to the third theory, suffering is both self cause and other cause. This theory is an attempt to combine the first two theories, which are equally false. The combination of two false theories makes a doubly false. The four reject the first three theories and seek to explain human suffering as beneficent by change due to previous suggestion. By explaining defects or suffering as a cause of dependent rising, the Buddha goes beyond these four theories. This is the second one of the 12 links costed formula, where each succeeding link is a stored resource from which immediately precedes it. What the trailing costed formula clearly demonstrates is that the cause of suffering and not outside individual existence, that they are identifiable and therefore removable. As to the Buddhist view of suffering, one participant question that has been raised is his. Does it mean there is suffering in life, or that life itself is suffering? The answer to this question will become clear if we examine how the path of suffering is defined in Buddhism. The Buddhist definition of suffering has three levels. The first level, identifying four conscious occasions of suffering, namely the trauma of past jadi, the morality of destructive jada, the pathology of sickness jadi, the prohabits of death marana. At this level, suffering appears as physical pain and oppression. To this may be as such experience as hunger, thirst, privation, and accident. This second level is more comprehensive and it defines suffering is in three ways: to be dissociated from what is pleasant, piyahi, vipayoga; to be associated with what is unpleasant, apiyahi, sambayoga; and not to get what one expects, and to face expression or in peace where ye piye not lafati. At this level, what is focused on is suffering as psychological experience. The third level of definition is the more comprehensive. It is comprehensive, summing up all of what suffering is. Indeed, the five decades or grasping are suffering. All seven occasions of suffering lists before the third level of definition could be a self-blind or more or painful social or suffering. However, it is the cumulative summons as to what suffering is that is more significant, the one that could be the more controversial. It is said that, in brief, the five decades on grasping, face, culpability, feeling, resistance, mental, construction, and consciousness are suffering. What this clearly demonstrates is not that the five decades of grasping are a sort of suffering, but that the five decades of grasping themselves are the suffering. Or suffering and the five decades of grasping become mutually compatible expression. Now, the five decades of grasping themselves constitute individual existence in this samsaric dimension. This very fact that they are described as suffering should show that, from the Buddhist perspective, it is not correct to say that there is suffering in life. The correct saying should be life itself is suffering. If life itself is suffering, is not this contradicted by empirical evidence, and not there pleasure is in sensual gratification in the relation of the sense. Buddhism holds not quarrel with such as assertion. If there were no satisfaction in the world, so grant the Buddhist argument, living beings ought not be attached to the world. Mention is made of many kinds of pleasure and happiness, which could be obtained throughout biased or non-biased me. The very fact that Buddhism rejects sensual gratification as a means to investigation shows that what is question is not an impossibility or sensual pleasure, but its validity as a means to truth happiness. Sensual gratification is not even described as suffering, as its opposite. The modification agent account. The very first nirvana is defined not as happiness but as the highest happiness. So that there are many other levels of happiness which are lower than nirvana. What all this suggests in this Buddhism recognize defined level of happiness thus community in nirvana and happiness is that can to be defined as that which has nirvana as its consummation. Nirvana, Parama, Sukha. There is a contradiction between the assumption that life itself is suffering and the recognition of the ability and the possibility of pressure and life. As we have already pointed out, the answer to this question is that what Buddhism means by suffering is any kind of condition, experience, and experience dependent on impermanent condition. Why are there five aggregate or grasping suffering? What we need to remember here is that it is not the five aggregate Pesa Kanda, but the five aggregates or grasping Pesa Upadana Kanda that are described as suffering. This expression should show that although the five aggregates in themselves are not a source of suffering, they constitute suffering when they become object of grasping upadana. Strictly speaking, therefore, what Buddhism calls the individual in this samsaric dimension is not the aggregate but the aggregate when they are grasped, appropriate and cast to. That which is called individual existence can thus be reduced to a causality, connection, process or grasping. It is this process of grasping that Buddhism describes as suffering. Yes, another question that arises here is by no are the five aggregates grasped? The answer to this question is that besides the process of grasping, there is no agent who perform the act of grasping. This answer may appear rather enigmatic. Nevertheless, it is understandable in the context of the Buddhist doctrine of non-self and the Buddhist doctrine of dependent arising. What both doctrines seek to show is that the individual is a condition process without an agent either inside or outside the process. The grasping process manifests in three ways. This is my Idamama. This I am a Doha must be, and this myself is Homeata. The first is due to crave Tana. The second is Mana, and the third is due to the mistaken belief in its certainty. 80. It is throughout this process of threefold the appropriation that the idea of mind, I am myself arises. If there is a prominent called individuality in this samsaric dimension, it is entirely due to the inversion of these three ideas of the five aggregates. At this point, at this juncture, another question arises. Why and how does the process of grasping lead to suffering? In answering this question, it is important to note here that the five regrets thus become the object of self-appropriation and grasping are in a state of constant change. In a state of continuous flux with no resisting sustain, that nature is such that they did not remain in the way of whence then to remain as such. The aggregates are not under our full control. Thus, by identifying ourselves with what is impermanent nature, which does not come under our full control. Another, we tend to separate this should explain why Buddhism treats the first of suffering to the first of impermanence, the anicca, the dukkha. When the process of self-appropriation and self-identification is terminable, suffering to come to an end. As long as this process persists, there is suffering. The moment is lost. The suffering process also is to be and together, but its all suffering can to an end.